Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member.
Today with me, I have Ruth Ingoldsby and Liz Fluharty. We all were prior managers and have experience in this industry, and we are a Vote HOA Now, the industry experts at online voting. So let's get started. Today, we're going to cover the Florida state statutes, understanding and choosing a service level, who should be involved, of course, in setting the parameters, the vote, getting started, a successful transition from paper to electronic voting, of course, some of the benefits, and of course, our favorite and the myth busting. So I'll let Ruth take it from here.
Thank you, Cathi. Welcome, everybody. I know people are still hopping on, so we're going to talk first about the statutes, which hopefully, since you're all in Florida, everybody knows what statute they fall under, but we'll give a little recap here. So, of course, we get our authority for electronic voting from the state statutes. If you are working with condominiums, that statute is 718.128, which had a recent update in July. We'll go over that. Of course, there's also administrative codes that go with that update, that statute, 61B. We have a couple of sections listed there. If you are working with cooperatives, then that falls under statute 719.129. And then, of course, the HOA or POA statutes, single family homes, what have you, may falling under statute 720.317. Now, the biggest mention here at the bottom in bold of our screen is that the authority for electronic voting, when we're talking about e-voting and electronic voting and online voting, it does not mean by email. So it doesn't mean scanning a paper ballot and emailing it to the management or typing in an email message, I vote for, so-and-so. That's not what electronic voting is referring to. It's a online or electronic system that presents you an electronic ballot that you make your selections on and submit. There are some other further statutes that need to be covered in that. So we're going to delve right into the first one. And we're going to talk pretty much about the condo statute. The co-op statute and HOA statute is very similar. But as I mentioned, this condo statute did have a change this year in July. But in general, the association may conduct elections and other unit owner votes. So keep in mind that's anything you need a vote of your membership. So assessment votes, annual meetings, of course, is the most common, but anything else, special board removals, I hate to say those, but those get voted on a lot. Other amendments, I mentioned special assessments, but if you need balcony approvals, roof approvals, budgets, things like that, anything you need a vote of the membership. So keep that in mind, and other unit owner votes. Okay, so we'll go back to the text here. Through an internet-based online voting system, if a unit owner consents, this is the new part, electronically or in writing to online voting, and if the following requirements are met. So before we go into the requirements, this new section is that word electronically got added. And so what that means is that if you are using an electronic voting company that puts out a message to your owners asking them to vote, you just have to put some language in there saying by electronically consenting, clicking the button, following through and voting, they are electronically consenting to voting. It's kind of nice. Most companies like ours have been doing that for quite some time. The attorneys have backed this process. So we love it that it's now part of the statute. It is not part of the HOA or the co-op statute yet, but most attorneys are allowing it to be done because this sets the precedence so that they can defend it, and hopefully those other statutes will change shortly. Now, going on, it does say that a couple other requirements of that e-voting statement, that it has to authenticate the identity. So that means you need somebody to actually type in, somehow acknowledge who they are. They have to put in a code that's attached to their account or their unit, somehow putting in their name, their email, some identifier so that it can authenticate who they are. Of course, the vote must protect the secrecy and the integrity of each ballot. In Florida, the ballots are secret. You must make sure your e-voting system is also a secret vote. And then this last bullet here, a method to confirm delivery. So basically your system needs to send a receipt so that owner knows that it was received, calculated, counted correctly. The statute goes on to say, authenticate the owner's identity. We were just talking about that in the previous bullet. Once they enter in their information, you need a way to authenticate that. That is oftentimes with that a unique identifier that you provide to that owner. Again, ensuring the vote is not altered in transit. That goes again with the receipt, things like that. So it kind of doubles on some of these bullet points. But the statute, the legislatures just, they wanted to make sure, the legislators, that everything was covered. So you just want to make sure that you're giving them a receipt so that they know their vote wasn't altered in transit, and that your system that you're using does not do anything with those votes as far as changing it. And again, then it says transmit of receipt to the owner. So that covers that one as well. So we talk about the secrecy a little bit more with this bullet. For the elections, able to permanently separate any authentication or identifying information from the ballot so that no manager, board member can know how anyone voted, so that they are just getting those tallies. They're rendering it, it's impossible for them to see how any particular owner voted. And then, of course, your e-voting system, you want to make sure that it can support your client with any recount, inspection, or review of those votes. So a lot of this is a little duplicated, but you want to just make sure when you're choosing an e-voting company, and Kathy's going to get into all of that, the differences with the different companies, but you want to make sure that they're able to follow this statute, and that their system follows all these bullet points in their statute. So the next segment, which is my absolute favorite of the statute, is that e-votes count towards quorum for the meeting. Yay! So what does that mean for you as a manager? Of course, it means that you're receiving those votes. You know your tallies going into the meeting. You know you're going to meet quorum, or that you've met quorum already. So regardless of how many people show up, if you only get 10 people that show up and your quorum was 120 units, something like that, you've got your quorum from your e-votes. So all those votes count towards quorum for your meetings. So wonderful there. You don't have to do as many reconvenes and things like that. You don't have to run around and door knock. So if anyone has questions on that, I don't think you will. It's pretty clear. All the e-votes count towards quorum for the meeting. Next part of the statute does require that you create a resolution. So this is not an item that needs to be voted on by the community. It's a resolution that gets drafted oftentimes by your attorney and or your board working in conjunction, so that you create a process with some items. And we're going to get into the details of what goes into your resolution, but that you must create that, establishing reasonable procedures for them to consent. And then you must provide that they are giving notice of that resolution to the owners at least 14 days before a meeting where you're going to use it. So most often, as you create that resolution and your board passes it, you'll then just email it out, or whatever method they are receiving their notifications from the association, that the board has adopted a new resolution to allow electronic voting as a method for gaining votes at a meeting or election, and that it's an option for them, and then they would publish that resolution. So I know Kathy's favorite segment of the statute is the next slide here. The one thing you'll notice when you're reading the statutes is it doesn't say anything that the e-vote needs proxies. So no more proxies needed when you're doing the electronic.
No more proxies. No more door-to-door knocking. No more running around at the end or at the beginning of the meeting trying to reach quorum. Really
so you
does
may still
remove
need a
the-
proxy if you're offering a
need
paper ballot, because again, this is an option. So people still may want to vote on paper. They may still want to come to the meeting. So if somebody requests a proxy, you would do that in paper, just like you normally would have in the past, and they would submit that. And then the person who becomes that proxy holder can then vote at the meeting when they come. Whew, so that was a lot. A lot of legalese there, a lot of stuff. We put it all in layman's terms, everything like that. Hopefully everyone's familiar, especially that change in the condo statute that added electronically, so they can do that right when they vote. If you have questions further about that, we'd be glad to give you some other guidance, but it's pretty clear and straightforward. So Kathy's going to next discuss, we mentioned about that, creating that e-voting resolution and what goes into that. So Cathi, you want to go through some of that?
Will. Thank you, Ruth. And, remembering what Ruth said just a little bit ago, this is one of the easiest things a board could do. The board does have authority to pass an e-voting resolution. And of course, they can ask for guidance or they can consult with their legal representative to help them get started. I have a feeling these are going to be pretty familiar or pretty popular once everyone gets started. So some of the things that you need to consider and remember, of course, is be as concise as you can, following both the state statutes and your governing documents. Now, as Ruth shared earlier, it might be 718, it might be 719 or 720. We'll want to be able to get that right section in there. And then, of course, any authority that you have in your governing documents to pass this resolution and share it with your owners. Some additional things to consider, of course, what are you going to do with paper? Remembering that online voting is just an option, of course, for your owners to use. We hope they do, but you still are going to have a few that are going to request these paper documents. So how are you going to send paper or proxies to those that don't opt in? And this is really a cost saving measure already. You're only sending it to those that of course, will not be able to vote electronically. Maybe they don't have a device or you don't have an email for them. And you want to be sure that they receive that information so they can make their choice to vote by paper or vote electronically. And what do you do? The next point, of course, is what do you do if someone votes every way you ask them to? I always say that they're either going to vote, they're not going to vote at all, or they're going to vote, by paper, electronically, every option that you give them, what ballot is going to win, of course, when you receive it. And we always say that the electronic ballot is final. So just some really important things to remember because you are going to get asked those questions, or your ballot counters are going to be faced with that decision. They're going to look to the electronic voting report. Oh, they already voted and we got a paper ballot. Probably cross through that ballot and say, that ballot is not valid. We're going to go with the electronic voting ballot. And hopefully they're identical, but we'll never be able to see because the vote is secret. All right. And then, of course, with every good resolution, the reason they make it at the board level is so that you can make those changes when you need to, review your process, look at your resolution, make sure that you're updating it and adding in some items that you wish that you have had access to or had in the resolution and update it at every step of the way. And that's true with any resolutions. I think we might have a question here.
Oh, we can't hear you, Liz.
Can a paper proxy give to an electronic voter to vote for them electronically?
Oh, great question. And this is actually probably something you should put in your resolution. Typically, a paper proxy is going to be completed in paper, in person at the meeting. When you are doing the electronic voting, it is a vote that somebody is casting for themselves. And again, that's that authentication that's in the statutes that the person has to register, log in, authenticate themselves that they are indeed the owner. So the statute doesn't allow for the electronic voting to be done via a paper proxy giver, that kind of thing. So unfortunately, the paper proxy is going to have to be completed in paper, in person.
Then who would count those paper ballots?
Right.
Excellent.
And I think you're just going to follow your same process with any paper ballot. Since it is a secrecy process, you would still have someone at the meeting who is going to open those envelopes, count them, and then add them to the electronic voting total. So you're going to follow your same secrecy envelope process that you always have.
And that's after you get
Good questions.
After you get your final report from your e-voting company of who voted and who hasn't, so that you're only opening those paper ballots, those envelopes, after you've determined they haven't already voted online. So again, that goes into your resolution. Get those reports from your e-voting company, then go through and verify on an outer envelope that voter didn't already vote online. Then you can open those envelopes and remove the inner envelope.
Now, one more question before we move. Oh, we got quite a few here. So once the association decides to go with e-voting, does it have to do e-voting always moving forward?
That is such a good question. And from our understanding, yes, once you've offered electronic voting as an option to your owners, you have to provide it to them once they've opted in and said yes.
Again, it may
So it
fall,
will
may,
just become part of your regular process,
Yeah.
electronic voting
it may
and your
depend on,
options.
it may depend on what statute you're under as well. Check with your attorney. That's the biggest one there. Check with your attorney. Yes. Somebody's asking about, do we cross reference to paper to electronic vote? Again, that's going to be something specific for your vendor. We're not talking about our company and our process here today. So some of those kind of things, you'll want to discuss those with the vendor that you're selecting. And we didn't mention it earlier, but we'd be glad to have you come to one of our demos that you can see how our system works. We'll put that in the chat and mention that at the end. So any process questions specific to your e-voting company will have to be answered offline.
Yeah. Why don't we go one more question, Liz, and then we'll move on. I think we've got a good one there about multiple owned units.
Yes. So if you have an owners with multiple owned units, can they vote all at once with their choices of candidates or choices?
Again, I think that's going to be specific to the vendor that you select. So, but yes, most vendors will have a method that owner could either vote on all at the once or that they vote individually for their units. All right, let's go on to
Questions. Yeah, we'll take another little break here in a little bit and answer some more.
Let's go on to the different.
Okay, don't forget,
levels.
update your resolution with all of these good things that have come up that you want to make sure that you have included in, the instructions and how you're going to handle each thing.
And for anyone who's got their hands raised, please put your question in the question and answer. That's how we're going to get to them all. So let's talk about the different service levels, Cathi, and the choices that we have.
Yes. So understanding and choosing a service level, gosh, managers, board members, we're faced with this all the time. Who is the best fit for our community? We know that in the electronic voting world, there are so many choices out there today. Some provide that full service setup and management, a full service provider. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the self-service or management software portals and other free items that you might run across. So first, let's go through that full service provider. It frees the manager up to work on other projects. It's nice to have a complete third party separation where your voting vendor is setting up your ballots. They're loading your owner data. They're making sure that they're looking at the state statutes or have some knowledge of how the state statutes are and what your governing documents say. They're going to be having those discussions with you about, what options go on the ballot and how you'd like that to look. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they are setting everything up for you. We'll talk about some of the benefits of that later, too, when it comes to challenging votes and different things. Let the professionals do what they do best. The best thing you want to be able to say is we do not know who's winning, who's losing. We have a third party professional running our vote this time, and we're all going to find out the results on the same evening. So, wow, that takes the pressure off the board, the committees, and the managers. Now, of course, we've got the self-service portal or management software. Now, this is some of our biggest competition. It's cheap, of course, and it does cost less money, but it does come with some higher risk and time for the manager. There is, a manager has a hard enough time carrying their portfolio, doing all their manager things. They cannot be a voting expert as well. So it does create more work for the manager. And I always say, you might have a manager that is, so good at, Excel or feels comfortable doing something new. But as we all know, there are manager changes and So from manager to manager, you might find that you're getting a different service, and that's kind of a place that you don't want to be. So it does make more work for the manager. The manager, board, and committee members are oftentimes involved in the process. So that is another thing. You don't want anyone pointing the finger at you saying you're involved in the process. Does not provide that third-party separation, so they really don't have anyone to go to ask questions or for resources or for any information or questions that might come up during the middle of the vote. They find themselves stumbling to answer those questions. And of course, it is more risk for the association. This is where we're seeing a lot of these votes being reran or reset because of these things that are happening. So make sure that you're picking the best service level for you. Of course, we always recommend the full service setup and management because they protect their clients from any of those other things
do have
that you may face with the self-service.
I do have a quick note comment about this as well. When I was a manager, it wasn't in our management agreement that we would be doing this. So if we, as a manager, was going to do something outside the bounds of our agreement, we had to invoice like $150 an hour for us to do this additional work. So for me to, as a manager, to learn new software to set up a vote was probably going to cost the association more money than using a third-party provider, full service provider. So keep those kind of things in mind. If it's not in your management agreement, you might want to be careful of offering that or getting estimates for those. I think Liz popped in. We probably
Okay, shall we take a few more questions here?
Yeah, I think a question that kind of falls in suit with this slide would be, are there any open source free e-voting software products? And if so, how expensive are the others?
Yeah, so again, we can't really talk about pricing, but we will say with this red bullet at the bottom there, keep in mind free or almost free means you are the product. Your owner data is what is being gathered and data mined. So that's why things are free or almost free. And you don't want to take that risk, in my mind, for your association that you're putting out more emails for them to get more spam marketing to. So there are products out there that are free or almost free, and other products other than ours, of course. And we recommend that you look at them closely, determine whether they're a full service provider or a self-service. Our company name, somebody had asked, you can see it's on our, what's on this side behind us, behind Cathy's head. We are Vote HOA Now. So all we can speak on is our product, and we can do that outside of this presentation. Since this is for a CE credit, we can't talk about what our service offering is.
And then as far as service levels, we've talked about full service or a self-service portal. We had someone concerned about cheating since managers can view who votes and how they vote.
Excellent question. That goes back to the statute. You're going to make sure when you are using a provider, if you're doing a full service or if you're decide to do it yourself, that it is a secret vote. So no one, even the management company, should not be able to see how an individual owner votes. So that eliminates the cheating aspect of them saying, oh, or seeing who's winning in advance. They should not be able to see who's winning in advance. So that would eliminate then somebody saying, hey, you're not winning, go get more votes. So this is a critical thing. You want to make sure your company that you select is following that statute for that secrecy. And again, knowing you're using a full service provider, making that selection, telling them it's a secret vote so they know, will help ensure that you are following that statute and people can't do those kind of things. Excellent question. Do we have some more on this
really
topic, or shall we move on?
Let's go on to the next.
Okay, so we are going to get a little bit more about the vendors. Even the full service vendors that you will find are not all the same. So Cathi, let's discuss about that.
Yes. And, as we know, all vendors are not the same. And so that's why when Ruth suggested that you look at the vendors and their services and what they're offering, and maybe you write down some points about the state statute that you have to know and follow. So we recommend, of course, work with an e-voting partner that specializes in community association industry. It's nice that they know, that they understand. Maybe they've, worked at a management company or have some experience that helps them understand the position and help you find the resources that you need to answer some of these questions. So it's always great. We we always say, if they answer their phone and they respond to their emails, that's what we're looking for, is someone who can help and assist all the way through. Of course, that their team is experienced in the association industry, providing that third party separation, what we call full service, of course. So they're taking care of everything for you. They're taking on the risk, they're taking on the liability and the responsibility of making sure that that vote is ran according to your state statutes and your governing documents. And of course, we love these industry leaders like us that get out there and do classes and share what they know with everybody. And there are quite a few out there in the industry. So is an industry leader in online voting education. Now, setting the parameters. This is probably one of the most important things that you're going to do, along with your list of points and the information that you want to put into your resolution. Picking the right single point of contact for your vote is going to become very important. Is it a manager? Is it a committee member? Typically, we are working with the manager. They are a person that has, no home in the community. They are your hired professional. Of course, it could be the manager or one of their admins. So that's typically who we see as a single point of contact. But we know I just listened to Don Bowman talk the other day about how many associations out here are self-managed, and board members, pick an e-voting vendor that has a level of responsibility that they're going to protect you from seeing that information. So if you've got a self-service community out there, you can still pick a third-party provider that can protect you from seeing some of that information or setup or anything. So ask them what level they offer to those self-service communities. So what we're typically looking for is a neutral party with no ownership in the association. They have the ability to answer questions. Is it an owner of record? Are they current on their assessments? Do they have the ability to vote? These are all things that typically your manager or the person that's in that role is going to be able to answer those questions. Ability to provide that vote and ballot information. Who is the primary voting individual? And how are we going to place these people, on the Excel spreadsheet? How are the candidates going to go on the ballot? I mean, funny enough, sometimes even they have to be in alphabetical order or by first name or last name, or maybe there's some requirement as to how they're going on the ballot. They would have the ability to know and understand these things. They're also going to provide those approvals. They're going to read everything that's going out, all the messages, the ballot, give a good review on those items, and then of course provide approval before the vote goes live. And then, lucky for them, all the way through the vote, everything's going great. They've achieved quorum. They are going to be the ones to receive that final report and take it to the meeting with them and be responsible for announcing those final results of the meeting. So this person has an important role. We call it the admin, the single point of contact. They are the person that we would talk to most often on a daily basis.
And keep in mind, for those self-managed communities, as Cathi mentioned, you want to pick somebody not running. We have seen that somebody on the board starts the process, and then once the vote's going to run, because everybody, obviously everybody lives in the community or in the condo. Once the vote is running, they turn it over to like their CPA to get those final results and things like that. So there's always those kind of options, that there's somebody else that works for you. You may even decide to hire an inspector of elections or something like that to do that part of it. Or we've seen it, the League of Women Voters, that kind of thing, to get the final report if they're coming to your meeting, so it looks fair and impartial, especially for those associations that are very contentious in their voting. Somebody did ask about the final reports, and Cathi just touched on that. Yes, the manager or whoever is listed as that single point of contact is typically the one that gets the final report to take that to the meeting, and they'll get that list of who voted and who didn't vote, so they can then decide if paper ballots are being opened. We did have a question, and part of that I read. Somebody asked that if a vote is an amendment and it's obvious from the amendments being run online that it's already passed, do they need to open the paper, Cathi?
Yes, I think that you should open every single piece of paper or envelope that you receive would be our recommendation. You know, you even though you've already passed electronically, you just never know what's going to happen. You want to make sure you're counting every vote that has been received in your office, of course. And if someone asked you that, you would love to say, yes, we received your ballot and we did count it from your address.
All right, I think Liz has some more questions.
Yeah, we have a
Mhm.
lot of good questions. And so just kind of
We
combining
still have
them.
a half an hour left, so we've got
Yeah.
plenty of time too.
We
Yeah.
have some questions as far as if owners decide to opt out of electronic voting, must paper process be followed in lieu of online voting?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, they can opt in or opt out at any time at their leisure, of course. But if they did opt out, you would have to add them to that paper list.
And then if electronic voting was offered last year, do residents need to complete the opt-in form each year? Once someone opts in, can they change it?
Yeah, great question. No, they can continue to carry that opt-in until they decide to opt out. So you do not have to ask them again, or they do not have to say, yes, I opt in.
And keep in mind, the opt-in is often very similar or the same as the registration process authentication that's required in the statute. So it may be a combination. So it may look to them that they have to register every year. And that's because you need to gather that electronic signature and authenticate who they are. So it may seem like they're opting in every year, and that's because of that part of the statute and that electronic authorization.
Will we be going over the authentication process and identifying an owner? We have a couple of
Not
questions.
That would be more in a specialized about our process. So I would recommend that come to our webinar. We have one tomorrow if you want to learn more about how we operate and what we do. But yes, that's going to depend a lot of that opting in and authorization of multiple
And if they're
unit
voting from the same
owners.
server.
Yes, all of that is specific to your vendor. So as far as the same server, yes, your vendor should be gathering that information, their server or their IP address and that kind of thing, so that you have that. So those kind of reports can be looked at to see if there's anything a little fraudulent going on there. But keep in mind, if you are doing like an election night where somebody's coming to the administrative office to use their computer for voting, that obviously all those would come from the same server. We have seen that. That's kind of a fun night to do.
And Gary had an interesting question. Sorry, Liz, I know you're monitoring the questions, but we're all reading them. I opted out. Can I give my proxy to someone to bring to the meeting? Yes, Gary. Even if you voted 10 times electronically and you decided this time that you want to get a proxy and give your vote to your neighbor or someone that's going to the meeting, you can certainly do that. You would contact the management company or whomever and ask them for a paper proxy.
Right. All right.
We don't recommend you managers put paper proxies or ballots in any envelopes. Allow your owners to make their own choices on how they would like
especially
to
the
vote
first
and
year
ask
of
for those
voting.
documents.
The first year e-voting, you may do a double up. You may do, you know, a paper proxy in their envelope, but I recommend that they choose electronic because it's the preferred. It gets counted instantaneously, and that please, if you're voting electronically, do not return the paper ballot. But on that note, let's go into the more about the parameters, Kathy, and the usage.
There's one question here that has came up twice. I'm just gonna grab it really quick. Condo control, okay. I think you're asking me if the voting system on condo control or something, it still is considered a self-service management process and has more risk. But if you're talking about exporting your Excel spreadsheet from condo control so you can have all the owners' emails, then yes, that is a perfectly acceptable way of gathering that data for electronic voting.
Again, specifics about companies that offer and the products, we can't discuss that here. So, all right, let's go on to the usage types of votes.
Let's do. All right, so some more setting the parameters, because there really is a lot of thought that goes into this process and setting it up, making sure you're updating your resolution, that you have one, and you're looking at all these details. So we always say usage, make the most of your electronic voting opportunity. Maybe you as a board or planning have been planning an amendment or an important document revision or something for the membership to vote on. Add it on to the election. You'll have 2 ballots. You should be able to receive a full final report for each one of them, but bundling them together really makes a lot of sense, and you can grab everyone's attention all at once. And in most cases, you're going to save money bundling those together and running those votes at the same time. They have to start at the same time, as from what we believe, and that they may end at different times, because we all know an election could last 2 to 3 weeks. An amendment might last up to 90 days. So some of the type of votes that we're seeing all the time, of course, are our annual meetings, elections. That's what we do most often. But funny enough, we do a lot of other votes too. But when we're doing the annual elections, let's make sure that we're adding in our meeting minutes, our IRS ruling, 7604, any ARC items. Maybe we're electing an ARC board. That is kind of how we're talking about usage, like getting all these things taken care of. So there really isn't anything anymore that you have to do by paper very often. Amendments, membership votes, along with budget, special assessments, loan approvals. We're doing, paint colors, lobby designs, any kind of membership votes that might come up that you need all year long.
Including the board removals. Somebody asked that.
Yes. Right. So lots of really important votes going on, and less board removals if you have no questions about the voting process. So once your owners begin to know and trust a process, you'll have less of those requests, of course. So setting the parameters, again, just a few other things to, of course, consider there. Now, getting started. Ruth talked a little bit about the codes, the state statutes, that type of thing, but these are just some things that you really should consider. Call for candidates. This is the most important thing that we're doing these days, is allowing 2 to 3 weeks for a call for candidates. So you can really, truly have all the candidates submit the same information. Maybe you're asking for a photo this year. Maybe you're asking for a 1 to 5 minute video. Maybe you're just asking for a resume, or you have a form for them to fill out and must be due in the office by the deadline. We love these deadlines because it just means that sometimes, in some cases, we don't have to put any write-in spaces on the ballot, or we don't have to take any nominations from the floor. So be sure to know what the quorum is, when your call for candidates due date is. Leave enough time for you to vet those candidates, look at their forms, make sure they're owners of record, that they have the ability to vote and they're meeting all of the conditions before you officially drop your notice into the mail. This is going to mean that you may have to start at least 90 days before your election is going to start looking at some of these things and making a checklist. Election, how many positions do we have? We know it's just positions, not actually seats. And we always say, if you don't know, maybe you've gotten a community or you're not sure, there's no time. You have to just start doing the right thing today. So we may have to start over with positions if we don't know our staggered terms. Write-ins, are they allowed? The condo admin code says you must have a minimum of 14 days voting. The candidates must be listed in alphabetical order by last name. So giving us more guidance here. Cannot say incumbent in any information that they're providing on the ballot. Now, if you've got a form or you're asking them to fill out a resume, oftentimes those can be viewed as well. So they can read more about that candidate to find out that they've been serving the community for, the last 4 years, and you've really respected what they're doing and you'd like to see them continue. No write-ins. This is such a nice thing that we really don't have to vet a bunch of candidates after the call for candidates is over. So no write-in spaces. And of course, it doesn't matter what you're doing. A secret ballot applies whether you're in an HOA or a condo or a co-op. This is a fun one. The owner date of record. If everybody raise your hand out there if you know what this is, because a lot of people forget about it. Yes. Ruth, you want to go over the owner date of record?
I'd be
She's really
glad
good
to,
at this one.
Kathy. Yes. So the owner date of record is so very important, and it gets missed a lot because it's not part of this specific co-op, condo, or HOA code. It's the corporation code. So we often forget that we have to fall under that corporation code, the non-for-profit as well. But basically this is establishing who is eligible to vote, and it most often applies to your annual meeting election. And in this case, it says, if not otherwise provided or pursuant to the bylaws, the record date for determining owners or shareholders entitled to notice and to vote at an annual or special meeting is the close of business day before the first notice is delivered. So you pull that owner data to send out your mailing that the day before you actually do the mailing, that's your owner date of record. And this applies to those annual meetings, that you don't change owners in and out unless they were already closed on their house and you just didn't find out about the escrow until after that day, after you had already sent it. But so keep in mind, your e-votes for your annual meetings and even your paper votes are only a couple of weeks long, typically, sometimes 30 days. So you're typically not changing owners in and out for resales after that date of record established by that date of your notice. So of course, for an amendment vote that goes on a little longer, you may have owners that change in and out. So that's a little different, but yes, that owner date of
And
record,
something,
so critical.
yeah. And something also that you may want to add into your resolution is that you're
Yes.
just saying the date of record, of course, is going to be the date that we drop the notice in the mail each year.
Yeah, because if your
And explain
bylaws
a
are
little bit
silent,
about what that
maybe
is.
add that to your
Yeah.
resolution, just so that it's not being forgotten.
It's there. It's there for you. Use it.
Excellent,
Yeah, and
excellent.
we did have some ask for that resolution, or if we had any. And so I did put
Yes.
that link.
At the end, we will have our like an email for our to ask questions, and basically if you just put in our name into your Google search with a .com, you'll get to our website, which will have resolutions and demos of what we do and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, and we do have some good
But
questions.
we still do advise, if you're going to grab our resolution, to have your legal representative look
Yes.
over the
Okay.
resolution and make sure that it's is appropriate for your
And
community.
I saw a great resolution actually a couple weeks ago. An attorney wrote, "We will follow all current statutes." It was great. It was like 4 points, and it was like, we'll follow all statutes, like for that part of it, so that you're not constantly changing the legal side of it if the statutes change. And then it went into further about their own specifics. So it was
So
nice.
as far as statute, Theodore says it requires us to continue to allow electronic voting to a member upon request. However, our vendor had a back door in their software and we won't use them again. How can we comply with the statute?
Great question. Yes, choose another e-voting vendor. That's all you have to do. Sorry that you had a problem with that one, but like we said, besides us, there are others out there. To continue to allow electronic voting doesn't mean you have to use electronic voting with the same vendor, just that you must continue to offer it as an option.
Then let's see. Can voters change their votes after casting a ballot? Is this an option available when the vote is secret, or only if it's not secret?
Great question.
This is going to go back to your resolution. And, you know, in most cases, electronic ballots are final. Any paper ballots dropped in the mail are final. You know, if you wanted to have a process to allow someone to change their vote after they've already submitted it electronically or by paper, that is going to be something outside of the electronic voting process. And, you know, with it being a secret ballot, I'd be hesitant to even, especially if they submitted a paper ballot, there's just no way to know how they voted before. So all secret ballots are secret and final, and that's how we would stand with it there.
And then I'll do one more question here. At their condo last year was the first year they had e-voting. They opened the e-voting before the candidates forum. Not a good idea. Is there anything in the statutes pertaining to this sort of thing?
Not that I've seen in the statutes, but it is
Yeah.
our recommendation. You do any kind of meet the candidates night, before you open your e-voting. Again, in the resolution, in the statute, it says that you have to have minimum 14 days voting. So if you open that up a little bit and you're going to say, we're going to have 3 weeks voting, you just want to make sure your meet the candidates night is at least the day before voting opens, so people can know who the candidates are, and then your voting opens that next day. So you just want to make sure that's just a scheduling issue.
Yeah, it is. And it's really not required that you do a meet the candidates night, but it is nice to know who the candidates are. And you may get someone who drops out before that meeting or something. So it's great to do all those things before the electronic voting starts. So you can make sure that you have candidates on the ballot that are willing to run.
And keep in mind, Cathi mentioned that if you get resumes, if you have them fill out a candidate nomination form, biographies, paragraphs of intents, all that should be able to be put on your e-ballot by your vendor, pictures even, or links to videos. So your ballot should be really a robust ballot. So owners, when they are voting, can know who they are voting for, can read all those candidate informations and submissions. So keep that in mind. If you're gathering that information, provide that to your owners, just like you would have provided it in a paper packet. Provide it to your vendor to make sure it's on your ballot.
And just one more, Mark Lawson asked this a while ago. I apologize, I didn't see it, but they have a lot of elderly residents that may not be smart or savvy with e-voting, but also may not have the mobility they once had to attend the vote in person, and may have misplaced the paper vote that was given to them weeks and months before. And then it says full service provider.
Yes. We, sorry, we didn't have that in this presentation. That's in a different presentation. We talk about the demographics, and actually the older demographic, I want to say the 70 plus, they are the most highest level of response rate for e-voting, because they do look at their emails daily, many of them, and they want to participate. So they do follow the instructions and vote electronically. So you just want to make sure you're working with a vendor that their instructions are very easy to follow, that the system guides them along so that that owner can vote. And that maybe if they registered and didn't finish their vote, that make sure that system provides a reminder email to those that didn't complete a vote to go back to vote. So you just want to make sure that you're working with a system that is user-friendly for that demographic. We find that it's the best one, the best response rate in that demographic.
There's just more questions left. Did you want to answer those, Ruth?
Yeah, I see about how long has e-voting been implemented in condos. Well, in Florida, I think the law, Cathi, if I recall, was 2015.
July 15th, 2015.
Yeah, so coming up to almost 10 years. So
10 years. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
It just takes a while for things to catch on.
Yeah. Great.
What
Somebody's
if your
asking about
bylaws conflict? Yeah.
So again,
Yes.
hierarchy. This is the hierarchy, right? The pyramid, the hierarchy of the governing. So federal law first, state statute next, then of course your municipality, and then your condo or your HOA laws. So state statute is going to overrule anything about your bylaws unless they explicitly say in the statute, usually it's notwithstanding. So meaning this supersedes your bylaws. So you just have to read that to see if something was written that supersedes the statute. So, but typically,
and if it is really clear that it says no electronic means, then you may have to actually have your documents amended or have an attorney review that and see if you can, get around it, or if you really do have to do a document amendment. And those document amendments for offering these new technology and whatnot are very popular, and we don't see them fail.
Right. All right, let's go on to some benefits.
Okay,
Cathi.
let's do. I think we have a couple more slides. We know we're edging up on our hour with you. Thank you for being patient, and we will answer every question we can before we end. So benefits of a successful electronic vote. Easy for owners to use. So like Ruth said, go out, view those systems, make sure you know and understand how they work, that they must receive a receipt of exactly how they voted. This is our best friend. The best thing we've ever done for voting is that the owners receive a receipt. Remember dropping them in the mail and we never knew if our ballot made it there or not. Authenticated results instantly, no miscounted ballots. Electronic voting will not let you make too many choices on the ballot, and you are signing it each time, so every ballot is valid and counted towards quorum. Much higher participation rate, and this is so true. We are seeing communities achieve quorum times 2, times 3 after 10 years of not achieving quorum. And this is a great place to be, especially in this environment with all of our owners asking questions, challenges, lawsuits. We do want a duly elected board. That's one of my big things. I love having a duly elected board to represent the community. Of course, you're going to achieve quorum more reliably. You know, it's only because you're able to reach them more often than you can by paper. And of course, my favorite, again, I get to say it, a duly elected board with the
Cathi
normal
likes that one a
rotation
lot.
of terms. Yes.
Yes. But there's even more benefits than just these.
Yes, and we have a whole nother page. No more door to door. Everyone, let's clap our hands for that. You know, remember
Yeah.
we used to do this all the time, the crazy things that we've done to achieve quorum, or rolling over a board for another year. Once adopted, of course, the resolution, you know, e-voting in your community, it can work for any vote or survey sometimes that you want to send to your community. And what a wonderful thing, by saving money, saving time, offering these new fun options, the board and the managers are going to look like superheroes. I remember when I was a manager, they were always looking to me to bring something new and fun and exciting to the community. And this is it, electronic voting. And it is really fun. So we'll go through some of our myth busting. I think we've got a few more minutes here, and then we'll get to a couple more questions. And Ruth and I will share these. We don't have all the owner email addresses. Now, these are all the reasons that we hear that you're not adopting electronic voting. We can assure you, you will have more valid email addresses after your vote ends than you ever have before it started. It's funny when people want to vote electronically, they're coughing up their email addresses all over the place to get to have that option to vote in your community. So don't worry about that and you're still going to have some people that want paper. That's all there is to it. So it is just certainly an option, but a good one.
Yeah, we see
It's
it all
not
the time.
legal.
We see
Yeah.
it all the time that people who you never got an email from before are contacting you saying, my neighbor told me we're voting electronically. Why didn't I get the ballot? And then all of a sudden they cough up their email, as Cathi said.
Yes. Yeah.
So the next one,
Ruth
it's not,
busted the one it's not legal
yeah, I think
all
that's
over
done.
the
I
place in
think,
the first slides.
I think we put
You
that
are
to
going to
bed
get a
already.
copy of this handout so you can refer to them again.
Yes. Which goes into
But
the
you know,
next
like
one.
we said, yeah, my documents don't allow it. That's the question we just answered. And you know, they may not. There may be some situations where you have to do a document revision, but in most cases, I bet we can find a way to pass a resolution and adopt it in your community.
Yeah. That next
What do
one's
you
so
do with my
critical.
emails, Ruth?
Yeah,
You're my vendor. I want to know what you're going to do with my emails.
so critical, this one. This is the one that we were talking about
Mhm.
before, like full service, free, that free line that was at the bottom of that slide. You want to make sure your vendor is just using their email that you provide them for just voting, that they're not going to sell it off, that they're not doing other things, that they're not going to market to your owners or sell off the data. So you just want to double check that when you're researching. Again, some of those free or almost free sites, that's what's going on there. So, and you can't even get a live person to talk to it, those kind of places anyway. So,
Yeah, if
yeah.
you can't get that question answered, don't go with.
So Cathi, what about if
What if
results
the
are
results are
challenged?
challenged?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
This is happening more and more. We are helping and assisting our community managers and our boards with these challenge requests. They're happening. People don't trust things. So make sure that your vendor can help and assist you. It is in the state statutes that says the vendor that you select should be able to help you with any recounts, challenges, or anything else. So these are some other questions that you need to ask. And then, of course, the last one, we have to learn new software. No one wants to do that. I don't even want to download an app on my phone. If we had a raise hand thing, I bet everyone would be raising their hand anymore. Everything is all, you know, typically web-based and they're voting by email.
And again, that's going to fall on that slide Cathi talked about, full service or a self-service provider or a portal. If you're choosing one of those self-service or a portal, yes, you're going to have to learn new stuff. You're going to have to become the expert, even in a court of law, possibly to stand up and defend
may
what
have
you
to go
did
to
and how
court.
you did it.
Mhm.
So that goes back to that. If the results are challenged, if you're using a full service, hopefully they have a process established to do that. And then
Yeah.
you don't have to learn new software.
Okay, let's bust out some questions, Liz.
Is it best to go through our attorneys for this online voting?
Well, I think that it is best to get their legal advice as to what direction you should go and if your resolution looks good. But in most cases, your attorneys are not those election providers. But it is a good resource to find out that you're making all the right choices, of course.
Especially with that resolution, definitely.
Mhm.
I would think you'd do that for any resolution you're writing, that you'd have your attorney review it.
And we did, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, we did have quite a bit of questions as far as services and features. Again, we are holding a webinar. I believe our soonest one is tomorrow. But also if you have questions, yeah, you can email us at info@votehoanow.com. Ask us about our features. I know many of you were wondering if, certain softwares allow for paper to be entered. And I think we even have one here.
And keep in
as
mind
can
on that note, on the paper being entered, again, your vote is secret, and that means secret to everybody. So that really shouldn't be something that you are doing, even if it's offered to you, that you can enter a paper ballot, because then it's going to tie in that you know how somebody voted because you saw that outer envelope, things like that. So be very leery of that, and because of the state of Florida requirement for that secrecy. Somebody did ask if they entered a vote wrong. And then the owner maybe contacted you, say, oh, I misclicked. Can I have that redone? Again, that's going to depend on your attorney's opinion on that, and then your voting company's capability to do something like that. So that's something you may want to ask your attorney in advance. And again, as Cathi mentioned earlier, put that in your resolution. What do you do in that kind of situation, and make sure that your voting company can handle that. And if there's any additional costs to do something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question.
We also had somebody asking about how do you decide who gets to vote if there's more than one person living in a unit. Again, often that was done with the consent earlier. So if you are emailing your owners to get their consents in advance, since you can just get that by email now. If you do have multiple unit owners like that, you might want to do that in advance of your vote and determine and ask them which is the primary voting email, so that you can get that all updated on your list before you contract out with the e-voting company. Otherwise, typically, if you're providing the e-voting company, more than one email, more than one owner, they're going to come back and tell you, you have to select one. So oftentimes management will just select the first owner. And then they'll hear from the other owner saying, I didn't get the invite, and then you might want to have to change it. So it might be a good idea to get those in advance to that primary voting email.
So I'm going to put the link here in the chat, and then I'll also answer this.
And then thank you for the compliment, Triva. Look at that. They had a great experience, and they had 889 people vote electronically and many from overseas.
Wow.
And this is one of the other benefits and values of electronic voting. We have this song about it that you can vote from a bar, from a car, from a boat, a float, and we go on and on, but you can literally vote from anywhere you receive email, you can vote electronically.
Excellent. Quick last question. I see HOAs are not required to provide e-voting if the membership doesn't want it. If your board doesn't want it, you're not required. It's just, again, an option for your association to get more votes, especially if they're contentious or you're not getting those quorum requirements. It's an option.
Secret. Just get yourself out of that secret. Yeah. Yes. You just want to be sitting back waiting for the results, knowing that you met.
Right.
Thank you for all the compliments. We love this presentation too. We could sit here for another hour and talk about all the things that we know. So please consider joining us and learning more at some point.
And again,
thank
yes,
you. Thanks, Ashley.
If you have specific questions about processes, what we do, as we mentioned, come to our webinar. It's on our website, votehoanow.com.
Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, Click the subscribe button now.